With the 250th anniversary of the founding of America rapidly approaching, we wanted to explore what is going on in New York this year to celebrate the big milestone and to highlight some of the events, as well as discuss efforts by the state to invest in anniversary attractions and promotions. We're joined on the Capitol Press Room by David Frank, Assistant Commissioner at the State Education Department, which co-leads the New York State 250th Commemoration Commission. Thanks for making the time, David.
Thank you very much, Dave.
Well, let's start with resources that are available. What sort of funding has the state made available and is flowing through this commission? And where do things stand with that, broadly speaking?
Right. So first, we want to thank the leadership of Senator Mayer and Assemblymember Warner for introducing the bill that funded the 250th Commission. That bill allocates $5 million. It's jointly split between New York State Parks and the New York State Education Department. And State Education Department has worked very closely with the Commission to allocate these funds into three strategies to bring the revolution alive and the commemoration, not only of what happened 250 years ago, but also the struggle over the next 250 years to today and beyond to enfranchise all New Yorkers in the ideals of our founding generation, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so of the $2.5 million that was allocated to state ed, we have those three strategies. Strategy one is called History in Our Backyard. We're allocating funds to support statewide initiatives, and I can talk a little bit about that in
Sure,
a little
let's
bit.
start with statewide initiatives, actually.
Sure.
Hit me.
So of the $2.5 million, $1 million is going into History of Our Backyard, and that's to support exhibits at our New York State Museum to commemorate the revolution, to create resources not only in the capital region, but for our cultural institutions and schools across the state through reciprocal agreements. We are working with our PBS stations. So there's existing programming that the PBS stations are doing, and we're providing about $300,000 to them to go deeper and to expand that, every single PBS station across New York. We're working very closely with our indigenous nations. We're providing some funding to reimagine some of the historical markers that we have in New York, not to take any down, but to say that there's more context that can be provided. And so we're working with the William Pomeroy Foundation, our 9 indigenous nations that we have a government-to-government relationship with, and we'll be bringing this work to all corners of New York through that History in Our Backyard.
And in terms of the State Museum, what is going to be on display or might already be on display since, while July 4th is the big day, I imagine you're trying to stretch out the celebration for most of 2026.
Yeah, we already have a great exhibit on George Washington. If people haven't seen it, they should come to the State Museum. It talks about the sometimes complicated history that this seminal figure in our revolution had, both nationally and also right here in New York, which really was one of the epicenters of the revolution.
And controversial would mean like slave owner and some other stuff, probably?
And his relationship with our indigenous nations as well. We have a gunboat that was, when they were excavating the World Trade Center after September 11th, they found a Revolutionary War gunboat because the water levels in New York around the harbor have changed over the years. So we have a gunboat that's being reassembled at the State Museum. And then in this summer, the summer of 2026, we're unveiling an interactive exhibit that talks not only about the revolution, but also that unfinished revolution and the important role that New York played in, as I said before, bringing those ideals of our founding generation to every New Yorker, whether it's through the women's suffrage movement, where Seneca Falls was a pivotal moment and a place for starting it, whether it was the labor rights history and the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, and the Wagner Commission, or Stonewall and enfranchising LGBTQ New Yorkers.
So I imagine you're hoping that this isn't like a one-and-done visit for people to the State Museum as they get, 250th fever this year. So what are you doing to potentially capitalize on maybe first-time visitors or visitors who come to the State Museum for the first time in a long time? How are you trying to make them repeat customers, so to speak, right now?
There's great stuff happening at the museum, whether it's the current exhibit about Barbie, which might, at first glance, might seem that it's geared towards a certain demographic, but that Barbie exhibit really is about women's rights, the history of especially in the later 20th century, of changing values and ways that we depicted women. It's a really exciting exhibit.
Barbie is America.
It is America. That's right.
Give her a musket, too, and it's part of any sort of 250th celebration.
That's right. But it's about Barbie in space and Barbie as a women's rights figure and the connection that Barbie has to New York. We've reopened the gift shop. There's now a cafe in the museum, and a lot of the exhibits now are interactive. And so we're reimagining how individuals interact with the exhibits at the museum, whether it's exhibits that are tried and true and have been around that people remember in their own childhood, or whether it's new exhibits like the exhibit that's opening in the Revolution. It's all being reinterpreted. It's an exciting place to be. There's a big investment being made in the museum, both from state ed as well as from the governor's perspective. And I really encourage people to go to this free resource that's right here in the Capital Region.
Well, before we turn and talk about what's going on at the county level around the state, let me reintroduce you for listeners just joining us. This is the Capitol Press Room, and we're speaking with David Frank, an assistant commissioner at the State Education Department, which co-leads the New York State 250th Commemoration Commission. So you mentioned sort of the state investment, but you're also giving money to counties who have an opportunity to re-grant money to nonprofits in their jurisdictions. Can you talk a little bit about that local distribution of funds?
The vision of Commissioner Rosa, as one of the co-chairs of the New York 250th, is that this work, the work to commemorate the revolution and thinking about the unfinished revolution, is happening in every corner of our state. This is not just about the big marquee battles in places like Saratoga and White Plains, although that's very important.
And as a Saratoga Springs resident, I would hope you give the Battle of Saratoga its proper due.
Of course, and we actually, past September, we brought Ken Burns to New York with our partners at WMHT, and we did a tour of the Saratoga battlefield. We visited a local school district, Mechanicville, and we spoke to students about what the revolution means to them and how in 250 years ago, people who were their age, 15, 16, 17-year-olds, were part of this incredible movement and how they can also be active in civics. That's a big component of this. And so of the $2.5 million that state ed has for this commemoration, most of it is going right out to our local counties to fund and empower our partnership and share in their revolutionary history, whether it's Schoharie County, which was the breadbasket of the revolution and actually fed the soldiers down in Valley Forge during the winter of 1777.
It sounds like they probably could have sent a little more food, if I remember that winter a little bit.
They could have, but they got them through, which was the important part.
Yeah.
Or funding work that's happening out on Long Island or out in Western New York. And so we're working with the 57 counties of New York, plus the counties in New York City, to allocate funding based on a funding formula based on their population that they can use to commemorate the revolution locally or the unfinished revolution. And so places like Saratoga are using those funds to work on commemorating the Battle of Saratoga, but places like Buffalo, Erie County, or out in Suffolk County are using this money to attract people to local events, whether those are commemorations around July 4th, or out in Suffolk County, they have a history trail, and they have this wonderful booklet where people it's a passport booklet, so you can go from site to site and then get a stamp, and they're helping to reinterpret some of that work through their local county historian.
And how is the distribution of dollars going? Because I don't want to speak ill of government, but now we're talking about not one, but two layers of government involved in the distribution of dollars. So how is the flow of that money going? And will it be out the door in time for, say, the 500th anniversary? Or do we think the 250th is the mark to hit here?
Yeah. Well, funny that you mentioned that. We also are commemorating the 400th anniversary of slavery here in New York State. And so state ed we're working very closely with the Department of State to hire a historian on African American history, and also to have an exhibit starting next year all around African American history here in New York. But the money, of course, it never goes out as fast as we would hope that it would go, but we've been in touch with all 58 counties, and we're almost at the point where we can start distributing those funds. We're very confident that those funds will be out to our 58 county partners, plus New York City, in time for the summer. But in talking to our counties, that's not slowing them down. They're already planning for exciting events, parades, historical commemorations, reenactments. Actually, I'm going down to Westchester County on May 1st, I believe. They're having a reenactment of, it's called the Battle of Pine Plains in Yorktown, in Westchester, not Yorktown in Virginia. And so they're already doing work to commemorate the revolution. I would strongly encourage any of your listeners to reach out to their county governments or to go to our website, the Revolutionary 250 New York, and they can get more information, as well as our partners with I Love New York. All of the local events are going to be right up on their websites.
So I was watching the December meeting of the commission, and I noted that a representative from I Love New York had said that there weren't as many events registered as hoped at that time, but I'm curious whether you've seen an increase in registered events since then, and if not, what else can be done to try to drive up and create new opportunities to celebrate the anniversary?
Yeah. It's not that these events aren't happening. It's sometimes the events don't get to us at the state level.
Okay.
And so what we've been doing is just creating these really rich, deep partnerships with our local counties, especially with county historians, so that we know about the events. But as we're creating partnerships with our local PBS stations, with the counties, more and more events will be posted on websites like I Love New York. Again, I would encourage all of your listeners to reach out to their local county historian. Every county in New York actually has one. They're a great resource. Many people don't know that they exist, but they do some great work, and they bring history alive each and every day.
So there's this rosy view that some people view the American Revolution through, and as you pointed out earlier, there are complicated figures who did some pretty bad things, and I want to get into how you're commemorating that or maybe avoiding that. But first, let's play this clip from one of my favorite movies that I think embodies that struggle.
Hey guys, one more thing. Hey, this summer, when you're being inundated with all this American bicentennial 4th of July brouhaha, don't forget what you're celebrating, and that's the fact that a bunch of slave-owning, aristocratic white males didn't want to pay their taxes. Yeah!
And so for the people who aren't familiar, that's from Dazed and Confused.
Great movie, Dave.
Excellent. I'm glad you feel that way. So how do you go about that? And are you trying to avoid controversy, or do you lean into controversy?
Yeah. History is messy, and history is local. And at State Ed, we're trying to create the skills and tools that New Yorkers need to help navigate through history, to learn from history, and then to create a stronger, more vibrant society as we think about our leaders who are going to be the next doctors and lawyers and politicians. And in part, that's why the State Education Department is rethinking what a high school diploma means. That students,
way to bring it back to that.
Exactly, yeah.
That's some good communications work.
But it's about creating, ensuring that students have the critical thinking skills, the knowledge, the global outlook, that they can be savvy consumers of history and literature, and to allow students to talk about that. So we're investing a lot of funds in civics. We have a seal of civic readiness, and we actually, through our partnership with the governor and legislature, we're able to have programs to get our indigenous students more active in the seal of civic readiness, to do local history projects, and to learn by doing. Through our investment in the New York 250, getting money out to our local counties, they're able to interpret what the revolution or that unfinished revolution meant for them. And through our partnership with organizations like the Pomeroy Foundation, we're rethinking some of those. And I love our state's historical markers. I always want to slow down and read what they are. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But it's really important that we tell the full story, that we're not sugarcoating things, and that we believe in people, in their intelligence, and their ability to interpret things for themselves. We want to give them the full story, and then let people say, hey, I believe this, or I don't believe this, but leave it up to them. And this is all about local empowerment and giving people those tools and skills. And that's really not only what New York 250 is about, but it's also what New York Inspires and Portrait of the Graduate is about as well.
We mentioned the state's role in this. We mentioned the county role in this. What about the federal government? Are they partners in this? Are they making any money available, or are you having to go this alone, so to speak, as the Trump administration more broadly cuts money to, say, nonprofits and state and local programs?
We're willing to work with anyone who's willing to invest in New York.
Has the federal government made any investments?
To date, they have not.
Okay.
But we're always willing to have the conversation. But we know that history is local and that we rely on the resources that we have already through the legislature and through the governor to really make this commemoration of the 250th meaningful, but also to think about that unfinished revolution and the work that we need to do to ensure that every single New Yorker is enfranchised in our American ideals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I don't think anyone would argue that. Hopefully it's not controversial, but also that we're ensuring that we're coming together as New Yorkers and seeing what we have in common, not what divides us.
Well, we've been speaking with David Frank. He's an assistant commissioner at the State Education Department, which co-leads the New York State 250th Commemoration Commission. Thanks so much for making the time, David.
Yeah, no problem.
Support for the Capitol Press Room is provided in part by the Lawsuit Reform Alliance of New York. Fraud and lawsuit abuse impact car insurance costs for New Yorkers. Reforms are being proposed to mitigate their impact. Information on these reforms is available at keepnewyorkaffordable.org.
Support for the Capitol Press Room comes from O'Donnell and Associates, a public affairs firm providing strategic guidance to businesses and nonprofits on navigating policy and regulatory issues. More information is available at o'donnellsolutions.com.